It's our time to get together and talk about gang stalking. That's right. I know it's kind of late, but I like to do that. And I was out working today, so it took me a while to get this going. I didn't know it was so late. I thought it was only like 10 or 11 o'clock. That's the way it goes. Sorry if my voice is a little froggy. It's not like I sit around talking to myself, and well, I've been alone for the last 4 hours, so I have to break in my voice here, and it doesn't look like anybody's out there yet. It's always weird when I go to set this up. It'll say there's one person waiting, after it sits there for a minute, then it'll disappear if I don't come on right away. You'd think people had figured out by now, but that's okay. I don't schedule these, so that's the way it goes. And we're going to discuss sensitization and paranoia. It's something that all targets deal with. And, there are a lot of ways that this happens. We always end up rehashing these things, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's something that we all need to think about, something that all targeted individuals deal with. And hold on a second. My throat is just beyond. I'm going to have to get something to drink here. Sorry. Yeah. I'm not trying to trigger anybody. I'm not doing the coughing thing. Yeah. I'm just trying to get my throat cleared up. Like I said, I've been just sitting here, doing some things, taking care of some studying and other things. So my throat's, I've been, like I said, sitting around talking to myself. So let's see who's out there. Nobody yet. We've got 3 people. They haven't said anything. So I have no idea. Obviously, it's not the usuals. Anybody that's out there have anything to add to this before we get going? There's a lot to talk about when it comes to paranoia and sensitization. There are a lot of things that are done to sensitize targets, and I've talked about the fact before that really has to do with the ability not only to reprogram the targets, but to get them in a place where they can be attacked in broad daylight without people knowing about it. It's ways that the target will be communicated with. And, the people that don't know about gang stalking they're going to notice it. And I've talked about the fact that this whole mechanism of gang stalking was there before you knew anything about it. Okay. And I've mentioned that targets get thrown into this. Okay. It's always been there. You were not subjected to it. You weren't dealing with the obvious surveillance, the obvious street theater, the personal information and directed conversations and all the freaky stuff that happens to targets when they begin their experience in gang stalking. But it was there. Okay. And there are a lot of themes involved in gang stalking. And, one of the biggest things that targets need to realize when they start to experience all this stuff, it's not that it's all being done just for you. Okay. Some of it is. There's a lot of things that are specifically tailored for you. But, at the same time, there are a lot of themes and mechanisms involved in gang stalking. And, when the target knows that they are being, harassed or hunted or whatever, then it goes right into that type of environmental shock and awe. Okay. Because, targets are, they are thrown into the final level of that paranoia, and it involves some pretty intense stuff. And I've broken it up broken it up, into 3 levels because paranoia is one of the biggest elements of gang stalking. Okay, and it's scientific. It's one of the main themes that you're going to find in gang stalking. Hold on, I got to get something else to drink here. And it's a scientific process by which the target is reprogrammed through sensitization. The paranoia involves that traumatic invasion. Okay, all of it. And it moves through 3 levels. So we're going to really focus in on paranoia. We're going to look at, sensitization and so on and so forth. And that's interesting because there's quite a bit of science behind it. But in order to, really look at it, it's not just the sensitization, it's the effects. And targets can be triggered, and all that stuff comes out of paranoia. Sorry, I'm still clearing my throat, guys. So let's see if anybody's out there. No, nobody's out there yet. Looks like we've got 9 people. They're completely quiet. They're not saying anything. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. You can be quiet if you want. We can even call this power techniques of paranoia. And let's take a look at some of the sensitization methods before we get into that. A lot of targets will talk about objects of significance. It's a type of hidden communication or secret communication that is established through different things like symbolism, words and phrases, objects of significance, hand gestures, signals, loud vehicles, brighting, unorthodox behavior, odd behavior, stalling tactics, facial expressions, whistling, coughing, different things like that. Obvious surveillance is often used. Different noises, things involving timing. And then one of the other things that happens to targets in that surveillance process that is usually before, well, it can happen at any time, but it's usually before the extreme paranoia sets in, is that individuals who are infiltrating or are going to be activated against the target will begin to show up in mass. Okay, it's something that I've experienced. I don't know if you guys have experienced that. Nobody's, get in the comments right now. I'm pretty sure I didn't turn off the comments. Could anybody give me a comment so I know the comments are on? Even if you don't know me, just type anything. Huh? Well, it looks like no one's, I don't know, that's odd. I'm assuming the comments are on. They will show up in mass. And a lot of times, like I said, there'll be different things involved in that. And it will involve timing. And, the first stage of that infiltration of the target, of that level of paranoia, will involve these things. Some of them are employed a little bit later. It's a lot more subtle in the beginning of it. Targets are attacked with personal information. Okay, that's pretty basic for gang stalking. Your basic street theater, unaggressive, directed conversations, very subtle innuendos. And there's going to be a lot of coincidences. We talked about that with perps, that there's always a lot of coincidences around these people. Gang stalking is filled with coincidences. There's a lot of different silent methods that are going to be employed at first. And that happens throughout gang stalking. And it can also be part of the gaslighting stage that targets are going to deal with. But usually at first, things are a lot more subtle. You're going to see people, maybe looking at each other, strangely. They're going to, be whispering or, talking to each other, and some type of, way where they're having a conversation that seems relevant possibly to you, but then they're going to, oh, well, we're not talking about you. I've always noticed that. It's always one of the things that is involved in gang stalking. When you have perps, the directed conversations are always going to be part of it. It's not very aggressive at first, but you're going to see that. And of course, it's going to have nothing to do with you. I promise. It has nothing to do with you. The other thing you're going to see is that type of environmental attack where you have, different, I don't know, different emotions and mentalities or dispositions that are going to be emphasized by the people around the target. They're either going to be in a good mood or they're going to be in a bad mood, or they're going to flip from one or the other. And so you have all these weird things in the environment of the target, right? This is just stage one. You have the personal info, the street theater, the directed conversations. It's pretty low level. You're going to have subtle innuendos, suggestions. You're going to have a lot of coincidences. You're going to have those silent attacks, people with facial expressions or whatever. You're going to start putting these things together as a target. And then you're going to have, people kind of flipping from one emotional state to the other, or that the target is going to be noticing that people are going to either, be giving them the silent treatment, or they want to talk, or they're going to be very friendly, or they're going to be, kind of standoffish. And it's just going to be weird. And it's meant for the target to notice these things, because this is just the beginning of the paranoia. Let's see, Nicholas, I was wondering, man, no one was commenting. We've got 17 people out there. Well, welcome to the live stream. Yeah, my voice, I'm trying to clear it. Sorry about the, the scratchy voice, whatever. There's a lot of things involved in that. I've talked about the fact before that the targets are prepped sometimes. And a lot of people will talk about the fact that profiling will be done a long time before targets are aware that they've been selected for this. Just depends on what they're dealing with. And they will set up the target in a lot of different ways, and they will prep them for this. And it involves the things I talked about: the personal information, subtle street theater, directed conversations, subtle innuendos, a lot of coincidences, silent attacks, different things in the environment. They're going to treat you one way, then flip it to the other way. These things are going to be noticed by the target. They're probably also going to see low-level surveillance. That goes into what I talked about with the coincidences, so on and so forth. And then you're going to move into stage two. And by the way, all these things that I talked about involving the sensitization can be part of anything, usually after, stage one, which involves different objects of significance. Nicholas Bosman has talked about a coffee cup, sensory, things, whether they're smells or colors or whatever, symbolism, words and phrases, hand gestures, signals, loud vehicles, different sounds, brighting, unorthodox, and odd behavior, stalling tactics, facial expressions, different things like that. Obnoxious behavior, obvious surveillance can become part of it a little bit later. And then, of course, like I said, you have that group, I don't know, uninvited type of scenario where you're gonna have a lot of people show up, and it's gonna be it's gonna be weird. And I noticed that too. I mean, it wouldn't be odd for me to have a lot of people show up on my house, if it was a certain time of the day, or maybe an after school bake session where people wanted to come over and smoke pot, or a Friday night, or whatever. But you will notice, sorry, you will notice that when the gang stalking begins, it's going to be weird. It's not going to make sense, and it's going to be at a time usually after the target starts to isolate a little bit. Okay, and then people are going to start showing up in mass. They're going to be uninvited. You're going to have large groups of people show up. It might not happen to everybody, but it did mean it was weird. Like I said, I could see people show up, to smoke some pot or whatever, or on a Friday night or something like that. But the stuff that was happening was really weird. And I'm talking, anywhere from 15 to 30 people. And they would just sit there and be quiet and be weird, you know. And I mean, it's one thing to feel obligated to entertain people or whatever. I could see that. You got to break out, whatever. You got to entertain people. You got to tell stories. Maybe break out some pot or some drinks or some snacks or whatever. Play some games. But the people would just be acting weird and staring at you, and having little innuendo conversations amongst themselves, and it just really odd behavior. I don't know if any of you guys have noticed that. Not a whole lot of comments out there, but that was something that I noticed, and that was before any of the aggressive stuff started. You move into the level 2 stuff, and things are similar, but they're a lot more aggressive. The street theater and the directed conversations they involve, a lot more sensitive material. They're a lot more obvious. You're going to be dealing with a lot more aggressive behavior. The flipping of treatment of the target is going to be more extreme. People are going to be either hostile or negative. A lot of that is going to be coming at the target. Um, they might even deal with threats at level 2, combined with other different themes that are going to make the target paranoid, involving things like assault, poisoning. It might involve vandalism. Some of the character assassination is going to move in to that level 2 type of paranoia, rumors and stuff like that, little hints, and so on and so forth. Of course, that's going to be more aggressive as you move on into this. There's going to be, the hints that are going to go into that type of manufactured justification. And I've talked about that before, that, when things ramp up in gang stalking, when things become more aggressive, they at least want you to believe that they are justified, or that they believe that they are. Okay. It's not, at that on level 2, you're not really getting gaslighted as much, okay, as you're going to later on. The gaslighting is going to come later. I mean, there's gaslighting involved even in level 1 and level 2 paranoia, but right now you're wrapping this whole thing up, and the target is getting immersed in this type of environment that is preparing the way for all the things that I talked about, whether it's sensitization or reprogramming, or that traumatic invasion that all targets deal with. There's going to be hints about all those little themes like poisoning, or the doom kind of thing. The person's you're gonna go crazy, or I heard somebody just went nuts, or there's going to be little directed conversations involving that stuff. There might even be hints of violence. A little bit more hateful street theater and directed conversations are going to come out, and it's going to be intense and obvious surveillance. Okay. And then, of course, that's going to continue into the level 3 paranoia, which is really intense. And I'm going to save that stuff. And since it looks like some things are happening in the comment section, I'm going to go in and see who's out there. And we've got Targeted Pat. Welcome to the live stream. Okay, Nicholas Bosman says, I'm not really too happy to talk about it. When it was weed, everything was fine. When tweakers showed up, it went bad. Yeah. Well, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And I've talked about that before. And I made a video for Stephen DeBeek in Demonic Gangstalking. And it had to do with that. Okay. There are certain things, and that goes into the demonic aspect of this, where people are influenced, where things become more intense. Okay. And I've talked about that. It's like, a lot of people will, demonize or bastardize, uh, you know, basically anything involved in religion, a lot of legalism out there. And I'm not promoting that people go smoke pot or start drinking alcohol or whatever, but that's different than tweak. It's different than methamphetamines. Okay. It's different than hallucinogenics. It's different than hard drugs. And like Nicholas Bosman mentioned, when you start moving into that arena, things are different, man. And a lot of people, their gang stalking will begin or even um, be axiomatic around those types of chemicals. Okay. And I've talked about that for, when you get involved with people who are into that stuff, you have a lot of different connections. Okay. There's stuff involved in the occult. There's stuff that's involved in the MK Ultra program that has to do with that stuff. And it's not by coincidence. Okay. Ultimately, the techniques and the methods that were used in MK Ultra were around for a lot longer than that. And in my opinion, those things are demonic. And even after MK Ultra and around that time, you saw the proliferation of drugs. And I've talked about all that stuff being used to create alters in people that makes them more susceptible and easy to manipulate and vulnerable to the demonic. Okay, it's not something that's just about creating, Manchurian candidates and stuff like that. This goes into creating people who can be manipulated and possessed by disembodied spirits. Okay, so it's interesting that Nicholas will bring that up, because I think a lot of people would talk about that. You get people involved in methamphetamines, acid, and stuff like that, or hard drugs, especially when it involves intravenous drugs, and you got yourself some gang stalking. Okay, you got people who are being manipulated. That's a good point, Nicholas. Okay, let's see. Okay, all right. Emmanuel Godson, welcome to the live stream. Not a whole lot of people are being active in the comments, even though we have 24 of them out there. Well, you can sit silently and listen. Nothing wrong with that. Anybody have anything to add to this? We talked about several different things. We talked about the sensitization. We've talked about some of the techniques, objects of significance, things involving the sensory perception of the target, whether it's smells or colors or whatever. We've talked about symbolism, words and phrases, all those things that involve hand gestures and signals, noises, loud vehicles. There's a lot of things that can be used. Unorthodox behavior, odd behavior, stalling tactics, facial expressions, whistling and coughing, so on and so forth. Obvious surveillance. The target knows that they're being followed. And then that weird group dynamic that comes into play that Nicholas was mentioning, where you have a lot of people showing up. At least I dealt with that, and it was creepy, because it's one thing to have a lot of people show up to your house or whatever, and you feel obligated to entertain everybody. But it's another thing to have people like that show up and just get weird and just sit there and stare at you or be quiet, or, have weird facial expressions and then look at each other and stare, and their eyes are all dilated. I mean, I've had people show up on acid before and entertain people, back in the day. Of course, it's been like, I don't know, 30 years since that's happened. But I did, and I could deal with it. But it just, when you're dealing with that kind of stuff, it's beyond. And a lot of targets will talk about that. There's a point in time where people around them just get weird. It's not the same. When you move into that stage where you're getting obvious harassment and you know you've been targeted, a lot of things start to happen. That's just one of them. Okay. Asa Cowherd says, I got introduced to drugs in high school. I used to enjoy them because I was with friends. But if I do drugs now, the gang stalkers get extra active, standing outside my window, recording and yelling at me. Yeah, they'll do that. They might start a directed conversation at loud volumes, or they might congregate. That's another thing that I noticed when the attacks got intense. It was like these people would show up from everywhere. They'd be driving by, revving their engines. These are people that I knew that were obviously, using very aggressive street theater, and they were from other parts of town, and they would be just everywhere, walking by the house, standing out in front of the house, coincidentally on the same day. You're talking like, upwards of 20 to 30, 40 people in just a few hours time. And I'm not even talking about showing up at the house to knock on the door or anything, just standing around outside, walking, pretending like they're just coincidentally running into each other in front of your house and all that stuff. And a lot of times that will also happen after the target becomes aware of this whole thing and they get chased out of their geographical location. Okay, they'll get freaked out. They might move or leave or something like that. They'll get into another rental or whatever, and the people, they'll let them know. We still know where you are. We still know where you are. You can't get away from us. It's creepy. Anyway, Targeted Patton says, I noticed a few TIs behave as if they might be using stimulants, but it's no doubt that they try to associate every person who claims that they are targeted with it. Yeah, that's part of the disinformation campaign. And the other thing is that, they will covertly drug targets. And it's been proven, and I cannot remember the technical term. I cannot remember the part of your brain that is activated, but it can last years, up to 5 years after you are exposed to different methamphetamines, especially, meth and, crank and stuff like that, to where it literally activates a part of your brain where you find significance in things and start connecting dots, or you have more of a propensity to do that because of the chemical. It could also affect your emotional state in small amounts. And I had a buddy that I used to work with who he noticed that um, he was just off, and he quit doing methamphetamines. He had an addiction with it, and of course, he got caught up in the social structure, which is usually something that happens to people who are involved in that, and it's hard to get away from them because they will literally you know hunt you down. I've noticed that targets who are involved in that kind of thing, they'll want to break away from that scene or whatever. And before they couldn't even get somebody to hook them up with something that was legitimate, or they couldn't find anybody that wanted to share with them. They were out and jonesing or whatever. But now that they're trying to walk the straight and narrow, now that they're trying to break away, they will all show up and offer the individual drugs. It seems like it's coming from everywhere, free, you know, and it's just there's no way that's a coincidence. Um, it's pretty weird. I've noticed that. Okay. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, Targeted Patent says it's like they're a hockey team on a power play. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Binks the cat. Oh, welcome. It's been a while since I heard from you. Is anyone on Insta? I've got some content on. Never mind. I thought you were asking a question. Okay. Okay. It looks like Targeted Pat says, oh, they let me know that they still knew where I was when I was in the middle of the woods, almost a mile from the closest house. That's when they'll do that. Yep, they'll play those games with you. And like I said, obvious surveillance is part of it. The target is going to be experiencing some pretty extreme paranoia just with the things that we've talked about already. Um, you've got your subtle stage one, personal info, subtle street theater, subtle directed conversations, subtle innuendos, a lot of coincidences, a lot of geographical activity. You got the silent methods too, little facial expressions and stuff like that, and a lot of the environmental stuff where targets will get different attitudes from people. They'll either be really friendly or talkative, and then they'll switch it up just to kind of freak you out, to be inconsistent. That's one of the things that perps have in common. They have a lot of unorthodox behavior. It catches you off guard, and it's supposed to be weird. It's supposed to be surreal. You move into stage two, you've got very aggressive street theater directed conversations involving deep stuff. As far as the level two is concerned, the directed conversations in the street theater obviously are going to have personal information, but it can go beyond that. Okay, you're looking at things that might even involve the things that the target is thinking about or doing in a way where it's very private. Okay, to the point where it's really going to freak out the target. A lot of that stuff goes into stage three, and we're going to talk about that, where you're even dealing with things involved in control programming, which is a real high level of harassment. Not all targets deal with that. But as you move into stage two, these things get pretty intense. The target is going to experience threats combined with different themes like poisoning, assault, vandalism. A lot of the character assassination is going to go into it. That manufactured. Hold on a second. I've got a cat issue. Okay. Boy, there's a lot of little things going on tonight. Sorry about that. Okay. It's going to involve those themes. A lot of the manufacturing justification is going to go into that. Some of the rumors are going to be part of it. They're going to suggest a lot of things involving those themes. In fact, they might even say that you're going to be driven crazy or things like that. It's going to be very direct. Or the little stories are going to come out where they might start talking about other people that just were driven crazy, or they might ask you if you ever known anybody that just went nuts or something like that. There's going to be a violent behavior, hateful street theater, hateful directed conversations, intense, obvious surveillance. Okay. And like I said, we're going to move in to the stage three, which is the most aggressive stage of paranoia and sensitization. It's going to involve the break-ins. This is the stage where they are invading everything. Okay. And like I said, they're already in your head. And a lot of targets will move through stage one and stage two, and they won't be affected really. They'll look at this as a mental game. Okay. Because, even though some of the, directed conversations were getting their attention and involving the personal information or whatever, they're still not shaken enough. Okay. And I would imagine there's a lot of targets out there that are very resilient, especially if you've been doing this for a long time, experiencing heavy forms of harassment, the higher harassment, and they will move into this stage. And for some people, it never gets here. Some people, they won't do that. They don't have to. Some people will be so freaked out, by the surveillance and the directed conversations and all that stuff, and the obvious street theater and the different techniques that we talked about, with all the attention that they're getting, that it doesn't really have to go into that level. And I've also mentioned before that there are a lot of targeted individuals out there that we'll never know about because a lot of people don't make it through this. And some people will not make it through Stage 2, they won't. They might start talking to people. They might call the authorities and try to tell the cops. And of course, you run into the dilemma of either having people in on it in the sense that they know, and I've talked about the structure of gang stalking and all the different perps that can be involved. It's a type of superstructure. And, at the very least, that discrediting process can begin, and some targets might even get thrown into a psych center. They might, freak out and become incarcerated, maybe in jail or something like that, or they just freak out and try to disappear, or something else happens. The mental effects are so intense, they might try to commit suicide or whatever, because a lot of the stuff that is involved in stage 2 involves a lot of doom. It involves a lot of aggressive threats and suggestions. And there are people that at that point, man, they don't want to take a chance. They see their life falling apart. They see all these things, happening. The people around them are acting weird. Their salient landscape is completely different. They are entering into a type of twilight zone. All these things are happening to them. It will involve the workplace. It will involve everything. And at that point, they break. Okay. If they don't, you're moving into that stage 3 level where if you're not affected yet, if you're one of those resilient targets, this is going to get your attention. Okay. They break in. Not only do they get into your house, but they will do it at night. They will do it while you're asleep. They might fume you. They might drug you. They might put something in your food and wait. They might have hidden cameras in your house or whatever. And they will, even, slip you Mickeys or roofies or whatever it takes to get that done. And then, of course, you can experience a lot of the things that happened to me. At least that's the way it worked with me. I played all these games. I went from stage 2, and it didn't bother me. Okay, I was dealing with it. I had people coming up to me talking about witchcraft and talking about all that stuff, talking about poisoning and all these little games. And at that point, I just, I knew what was happening, but I thought, well, it's more psychological than anything. And of course, then I got a threat, because it wasn't affecting me. The individual that was sowing the seeds of paranoia in my mind kept coming over. And this individual was talking about all the things that could be done to food to give someone cancer, to covertly kill them and, drive them crazy or whatever. They can, lace your oven burners and, put this or that in your milk and all these little games. And, the guy showed up again, and I was being a smart ass. And he said, well, when people start breaking into your house at night and doing things to you, you're going to notice that. And he said it loud enough for me to hear. There was a few people in the house. I asked him what he was talking about, and he just said, I got to go. And he walked out. But it wasn't long after that I experienced that kind of a break-in. They drugged me. They took my clothes off. And stuff like that's going to get your attention. Okay. You're moving into stage 3 paranoia. You're dealing with drugging. You're dealing with poisoning, literally. You're dealing, with some of that stuff might just be to get you to believe that you're being poisoned. It might be things like Epicac. Evidently, they were using stuff like that on me, but they were using other stuff too. Covert drugging, covert poisoning, all kinds of little things. They're tampering with your personal property. They're moving stuff around. They might be attacking your pets. There's some serious vandalism and attacks on your personal property, sabotage, not only, of your personal property, but, nonstop workplace harassment. People are going to be involved. They're going to be aggressive. You're going to be dealing with aggressive neighborhood harassment, aggressive noise campaigns. The things that were happening in stage 2 are going to still be part of this. But like I said, if that didn't affect you, they're going to move into the other areas. And if they can't get you to eat your food or whatever, if they can't get you to, to freak out at this point, they will move up into fuming. They will move into electronic harassment, intense electronic harassment. You will also be dealing with things involving intense demonic activity. The stuff that you hear about or see in movies. Things are getting moved around in your house. You've got hardware. You've locked your house up. It's literally, things. It's like poltergeist activity. Okay, creepy stuff. I've seen it. I've dealt with it. These things can happen, and I've talked about this before. It doesn't matter whether you think you're dealing with the government or whatever. There's demonic foundations involved in gang stalking. I don't care if you're dealing with a secret program or whatever. There's going to be demonic stuff that's going to be involved. And that goes into the other aspect of the directed conversations and the innuendos and all that stuff and the street theater, that you can move into higher levels of that, okay? Along with the covert drugging and all that stuff. Now you are moving into areas where targets are really moving into some dangerous ground where, like I said before, there are themes. There is a mechanism out there that you are dealing with as a targeted individual. And when you are finally thrown into this meat grinder, this menagerie, you're going to have some shock and awe. And the whole idea is to get the target to start processing information in a personal way. And that will involve different themes and so on and so forth. And those things are going to be incorporated not only in the street theater and the environment that the target's in, but they're going to start noticing that stuff on different levels. So that moves into controlled programming, where you get some real crazy stuff where targets believe that the people are watching them through the TV. They believe that the individual on the radio knows all their personal information and so on and so forth. Because, like I said, this is a meat grinder. Okay. Not only that, you are dealing with demonic influences on individuals. Now the target is experiencing some serious shock and awe. No, not only before were they wondering how in the hell people were pulling all these things off, how much money, how much resources would it take to do this? What are they trying to do? They already feel like they're on a Truman Show, and now they're having dreams. They're having, clairvoyant activity involved in the street theater. They are dealing with things that are literally beyond. Okay. And they're really starting to move into that area where they're starting to have not only the environmental tyranny at levels that a lot of people wouldn't even be able to imagine, but they are starting to experience the propositional tyranny. We're going to get into those things where targets believe accident scenes are set up for them and all this other stuff. The radio is talking to them. The people down at the newscast are, watching them. Everybody knows they're the subject of the black, dark web, show. They're the Truman, all that stuff. And, they're going to be 100% sold on all this stuff. And they're not going to understand how this stuff is being pulled off. They're not going to have any idea of how to process the information and traverse the menagerie that they've been thrown into. And that's when you move up to the super high levels of paranoia. Okay. That's the kind of stuff I deal with, guys. You can even get into, the nonstop directed conversations. Like I said, there'll be onslaughts. The target will be chased. They will be hunted down. They might leave the state. They might try to leave the country. And this stuff will be nonstop. And the other problem that comes out of it is by the time they move into level 3, which can happen very quickly, depending on who they are, it might be within weeks or months, that the propositional tyranny is going to be so high that they're going to be reading into things on top of it. And that's when you get into people who are misdiagnosed with mental illness and so on and so forth. It's insane. They will experience intense community harassment. The sequelae of gang stalking has already set in. They can be dealing with stonewalling, blackballing. They will move into that place of a scapegoat. The effects of all these things are obviously paranoia to extreme paranoia, to irrational paranoia, to environmental tyranny, to propositional tyranny, to isolation, extreme isolation, deprivation, frustration, anxiety, anger, depression, and eventually psychosis. Okay. And the things that the target's going to be dealing with from the outside, of course, is perceived validation of rumors, the stigma around the target, the negative type of profiling that is going to be part of this whole thing. Just the perception of the individual and also the false mental diagnosis that is going to be inevitable depending on what happens to the target. the other inevitable effects, they're going to be experiencing persecution. They're going to be the scapegoat. They're going to experience hatred. They're going to be blackballed, and they're going to experience intense community harassment. And a lot of that has to do with the social dynamics that are around this whole thing. Once this gets kicked off, once the target starts to experience the sequelae of gang stalking, they start to experience paranoia. They start processing information differently. They start to isolate. They start to become dysfunctional. And then people who are not on the inside will be drawn in. It's pretty deadly. Let's get back into the comments here. Okay. I'm going to start at the top here. And okay. All right. Looks like you guys are talking about some stuff. The Dread Pirate Lenny. Okay. He says they keep sabotaging my vehicles, loosening lug. That's dangerous, man. That's really crazy because that's very aggressive, man. You could that illustrates the reckless nature of gang stalking. Not only is it reckless to just harass somebody, you never know if they're going to become complacent. You never know what they're going to do. You never know who it's going to affect. It's pretty crazy. In fact, when you get into safety schools, whether you're dealing with railroad safety school or other jobs that are dangerous, you're going to run into the same theme over and over, and that is the biggest killer when it is concerning traffic accidents or dangerous jobs is complacency. And targets are distracted. They're distracted, and things can happen. Okay, when you're talking about somebody loosening up lug nuts or whatever, Dread Pirate Lenny, well, yeah, disconnected sway bars, crippling brake lines. So, yeah, you're talking about not only attempted murder of the target, of the victim, which, in my opinion, gang stalking is murder anyway. You're talking about other people being killed. When you're messing around with vehicles, who knows who you're going to run into? It's bad enough that the target is complacent. It's bad enough that they are distracted. That's intense. That's ridiculous. Okay, looks like Ernie's in the live stream. Welcome. Now, Ernie says, I feel like I was put on some sort of a list. Maybe I pissed off someone when you were drunk. Or yeah, a lot of people will assume that, especially if you got a substance abuse problem. If you're one of those people that gets drunk and, and that happens, you get happy or you get cocky, you have a six pack and you think you're God or something. And I used to do that. I would piss people off. And then, they would come up and tell me, you remember when I ran into you about a week ago? Man, you really pissed me off. And I was like, oh, I didn't have no idea. I'm just joking around with you. Oh, okay. Okay. But you wonder. And that's one of the first things that people will come to the conclusion to. And a lot of that involves the disinformation that's coming at the target. Like I said, that manufactured justification or some of the stuff that you're going to deal with in directed conversations or innuendos or street theater is that you pissed somebody off. Whatever you did, it was bad enough for you to get all this attention and for people to, have an attitude with you to the point where you're getting all kinds of different mixed signals. And that goes into the positive and negative environmental stuff when targets are, either dealt with one way or the other. A lot of people will assume that. Maybe it's somebody that you made angry in an open forum, a disagreement, whatever. One of your ex-girlfriends or ex-boyfriends started a rumor. Who's trying to get even with you, and then the people of interest come to your mind, and they can actually turn targets against people like that too. A lot of times that will come into the disinformation where they will try to get you to attack people. Like I said before in a lot of different live streams and videos, max fun is when you attack people who are not involved or people who actually do really care about you. Okay, and they will try to convince you that so-and-so did it, or they're the ones involved, or they're fooling you, or they're really, talking about you behind your back, but they're not. They're people who literally care about you, maybe family members or whatever. And they love that. Maximum fun, maximum effect. Okay. Let's see. Targeted Pat says they put a Gatorade in my bathroom while you were at home and sleeping in a recliner, so they had to walk right past you. Yeah, I've look. Here's a good one for you, Targeted Patton. I had actually had the guts to try to have a relationship with a woman back. It was quite a while ago. It was not quite 10 years ago, but almost. And they they went after her. So when I was gone, when I went to work, she took a nap, and she was freaked out. What they did was they waited for her to fall asleep, and they went in, and she was drinking some iced tea or something like that. She had a drink, a beverage next to her, and what they did was they went and they filled it with ice and filled it back up, and then you know, as soon as they were leaving, they slammed the door really loud. And when she woke up, she looked over, and the big glass that she had already drank, and she knew she drank it, was full of ice and a different type of beverage. So she she goes, I'm not crazy. I guess weird stuff like that was happening, and she was like, man, she didn't even want anything to do with it after that. She was afraid to go to sleep out there. I mean, the stuff they will do involves that kind of thing. Targeted Patton mentioned that they had to walk right past him, so they will do that. They will choreograph these things around your vulnerability, whether it's when you're sleeping or whatever. Maybe you're naked in the shower, they'll do something then, whatever, because that's maximum effect. They want maximum paranoia, maximum invasion of the target's mind. Moving back up here, stealing all the forks. Targeted Patton. That's funny, dude. Yeah, yeah. Nicholas Bosman says, after my break in while I was sleeping, I wasn't sure I didn't just have a nightmare. Yeah, they'll make it weird. They'll put some plausible deniability in some of it, depending on how much gaslighting is involved in your dilemma. And they'll do that later, you know. So I'm kind of going in reverse here. Okay. Yeah, the video's great. That's my anonymity there. That's the way it goes. Okay. Protocol 7 says, yeah, I mean, the way my story ends in terms of gang stalking is, I'd say, even if it ends or means something like death, so be it. Well, I mean, you got to try to protect yourself. And I've talked about this before. There's only so much you can do. And that's something that you have to remember as a target, that, you're not in control of this. You're being subjected to it. Okay. And you can't control other people and so on and so forth. I would suggest all targets take this serious. I would suggest that everybody gets a security system. I would suggest they start locking their houses, doors, and windows with hardware from the inside. Don't just put some fancy lock on your door, they will get around it. Okay. I'm talking about hardware on the inside. I've had things involved where they were ridiculous. In fact, I could even show you some right now on the inside of my room. And I cannot sleep in a room that can't be locked from the inside, period. And I know better than that by now. Okay. And I've tried this a lot of different ways, guys, and they will do some really strange things. Along the lines of the break ins, which are, like I said, a level 3 technique to get the victim to notice this stuff, which is, really intense activity. A lot of people will talk about sexual assault, okay, rape, People they came in and did that stuff to me back in the mid '90s, and after they did it, they cut my leg. I still got the scar going right across above my knee. Just took a knife and put a mark in me. That was involved in the directed conversations and stuff like that after as well. You know, real obvious stuff. To the point where blood was all over the place and everything. It's crazy. You know, gang stalking is it's crazy making. It's really weird. It's like living in the Twilight Zone. Okay, let's see. Mr. Future says I can never figure out their next move. Well, yeah, I would suggest you don't do that. I would suggest you don't try to figure it out. Just make your life simple. We're going to talk about the solutions and start following protocols and keep yourself safe and just try not to do that because that's part of the technique to get the target distracted, dysfunctional, and marinating and all the stuff that they're doing. And it'll stress you out, man, drive you crazy. Binks the cat says heavy religious imagery and overtones. Absolutely, yeah. Ernie says 1997. Okay, that's good. You're a target that's been playing this game. My hat's off to you. You're a warrior. Nicholas Bosserman says, I thought everything was coincidental. I thought V2K was psychosis until they started uh, correctly using words you'd never, yeah. So, how are you going to do that? How are you going to be just spontaneously thinking of words that you don't know? Yeah, that's a technique. It's an effective one, too. How do you explain something like that? Okay. Asa Cowherd says, I've been told it is a test as well. Yeah, they'll throw that theme in there because I'm not saying that people aren't being tested. This is a testing ground where you live, but that's part of the game dynamic, right? Because, it's bad enough that they will use personal information or, something from the past of the target as manufactured justification for this type of behavior, which none of that justifies illegal stalking and harassment. Don't matter. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. It doesn't matter. Okay. No one has the right to do that. Let alone the targets. They ain't got nothing in their past or anything that would give anybody any justification to do this stuff anyway. Right. But when they enter this whole, menagerie, the game dynamic is part of it. Oh, it's a test. I hope you make it through this. And so on and so forth. I had a lot of comments like that. Just don't get angry. God's not going to give you any more than you can handle and all this stuff. But these are the same people that are harassing me. These are the same people that are playing this game with me. And the spiritual dimension will do that too. And of course, they'll turn everything into a sin. I've talked about that. And it's not it's not a sin to be angry. Okay, it's a sin to be angry without cause. Okay, get it straight. All right. But a lot of the things that are involved in the accusation stage, when targets are gaslighted, they're going to be called out on everything that involves, the sequelae, the effects of gang stalking, which is going to be frustration, paranoia, depression, anger. That's going to be one of them. A lot of things are going to happen. You're going to have a hard time concentrating. Your work might suffer, so on and so forth. I'm going to move back down to the top of these comments to see if anybody's talking about this stuff. Okay. Protocol 7 says we can undo sensitization. Yeah, you just have to realize it. You have to realize what they're doing, and you have to, you're always going to notice it. You're always going to notice it, but it doesn't have the desired effect. Nicholas Bosman says too many people with the same story to be fake. Yeah. Okay, so we got somebody in here. Is gang stalking real? Familia. Well, if you've never experienced that before, I would suggest you probably go to a different live stream or form of entertainment because it is real. It's absolutely real. And, the crazy people that are out there or the people that you think are crazy might not be crazy. Okay. They might just be people getting targeted and they may not know it. Okay. There's a way people get driven crazy. And gang stalking is a way to drive someone nuts. Okay. If you've never experienced gang stalking and you're coming through this live stream, and you don't deal with this kind of stuff, I would suggest you leave for your own mental health. But if you really want to stay and you really want to know this stuff, these things can happen. Okay. And it involves a lot of things. It involves secret programs, it involves government activity, it involves secret societies, it involves witchcraft, it involves things that are literally demonic. Okay. And if you're one of those people that have never seen gang stalking, but you believe in spiritual things, just connect the dots. Okay. When someone is tormented by demons or whatever, you just add individuals who are manipulated by demons into that mix, and you've got one hell of a gang stalking scenario. Okay, let's see here. Targeted Pat says the Truman Show meets Hunger Games. Yeah, that's a good one, man. That's hilarious. uh, okay, Protocol 7. I don't think there's anything to lose when you head down the path of desensitization and making the neural pathways stabilize itself. Well, awareness is part of that. Sensitization is basically, involved in environmental tyranny, creating associations, and propositional tyranny. And you take those three areas, and once you figure out what they're trying to do, you can cancel it out. You know, the problem runs into it when people start using, the things that have been done to them to come to conclusions that are based on irrational paranoia, and they have a presupposition based on disinformation or a faulty means of deciphering what they're dealing with. That's when you get people who believe accident scenes are set up for them, and they've got crisis actors with fake blood on them, and the ambulances. No, those are real accidents. Okay, but that can happen, and there's a lot more that goes into it too, because you have a lot of invisible things happening to targets, and I've talked about that before. Whether you're dealing with the invisible perp, or whether you're dealing with the demonic stuff that has to do with emotional manipulation and all those things, or dreams or whatever, and then the target is really dealing with that type of propositional tyranny. But you have to go into the area of propositional tyranny for it to really be productive for the gang stalkers. That's what they want. Okay, it's that nobody's going to get out of the fact that they're being subjected to this stuff, right? They're going to do it. You're going to be dealing with it, whatever it is, whether it's workplace harassment or people use the street theater or personal information or directed conversations. It's going to be there. But in order for it to do what they want it to do, it has to infect your brain in a way where you form propositions that are not true. Or you get into the place where you process information in a personal way and start reading into things that have nothing to do with gang stalking, right? If they can't accomplish that, they're going to have to be happy about making you paranoid, and then you're going to have to deal with the paranoia. But as Protocol 7 suggested, you can undo the effects of sensitization, but you have to be aware of what they're trying to do to you. And you have to be aware of how to process how people are involved. And you have to process the information in the sense that you have to know that there is a mechanism out there already. and that gangstalking involves themes. Because like I said, targets will get to the place where it's all about them. And they'll be accused of that too, which even makes it worse. Oh, you're having a persecutory delusion. Oh, you're the center of the universe. Oh, why would all these people be attacking you? Oh, how much money are they spending on all this? And you have to see that the mechanism is out there and you are now being thrown into the meat grinder. Okay? It doesn't mean that some of the stuff is not tailored specifically to you. It just means that without the propositional tyranny, without the target starting to read into things and notice things and move down that, that pathway, that spiral of sensitization, is not going to happen. If you can't figure that part out, it's going to get bad, and that's when you move into the psychosis. And it's not that you're not experiencing this stuff. It just means that you're going to be reading into so many things, and you're going to believe things that aren't true, that you're literally, going to be out there in left field. Okay, and that's when you see targets go off the edge. And we talked about that in videos before. What happened to this person? Where'd that person go? Well, I heard they got locked up. What happened? What we're talking about. That's what happened. And the effects, the sequelae of gangstalking, either push them into the place where they become, hopeless. They become so emotional that they're provoked, or they move into a place of propositional tyranny. Okay, that's always the way it goes. Okay, let's see here. Nicholas Bosmerman says, I got so lucky with the shrink. I told him everything he told me. I don't think you're crazy one bit. But I think things like this happen and try to desensitize. Wow, you did get lucky. That sounds like a pretty good doctor there, Nicholas. That's pretty rare. That's pretty rare. Every now and again, you will deal with that. Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay. Well, sorry, I'm still clearing my throat. I've been pretty much quiet all day. Nobody was messing with me at work, so I didn't have to yell anybody's name 50 times when I went to pick up the order. Who are you here for? Is it Sally? No, it's for Fred. Who? Oh, it's for Nicholas. No, I said Fred. Yeah, they like that kind of stuff. Today was pretty good though. All right, so you're going to be moving into the effects, the inevitable things that the target's going to be dealing with in the community, the perceived validation of false mental diagnosis, stigma, rumors, negative profiles, paranoia, extreme paranoia, irrational paranoia, environmental tyranny, propositional tyranny, isolation, deprivation, frustration, anxiety, anger, depression, psychosis. Okay. And we talked about the things that is used to sensitize targets. The power paranoia, moving through 1, 2, and 3. And we'll look at that. So objects of significance, sensory, whether it's things you smell, things you're looking at, colors, so on and so forth. Symbolism, words and phrases, hand gestures, signals, loud vehicles, noises, brighting, unorthodox behavior, odd behavior, facial expressions, stalling tactics. All these things are used to sensitize the target. They're going to find significance in this after they deal, with usually around stage 2. They're going to start noticing these things in stage 1, which is personal info and street theater. It's going to be pretty subtle suggestions, facial expressions, surveillance that's noticeable. Okay. Subtle innuendos, a lot of coincidences involved in stage 1, a lot of silent attack methods, and then the target is going to be exposed to different forms of environmental stimuli coming from the perps, where they're going to treat them, in a lot of different ways. They're going to flip back and forth on them. But it's going to be pretty subtle. You move into stage 2. You're going to be dealing with aggressive, directed conversations. You're going to be dealing with aggressive street theater. You're going to be dealing with these things in combination with the themes that are very, very aggressive. Poisoning. There's going to be talk about giving the victim cancer, or character assassination kind of stuff. Rumors, threats of vandalism, threats of assault. Uh, you're going to move into little convos that involve the themes of gang stalking, in the sense that you're talking about surveillance, workplace harassment, people just going crazy, people who all of a sudden need a psychiatrist or something. Little games like that. There's going to be all these little forms of communication. There might even be violent behavior at that point. Not only are the stimuli that comes at the target in stage one is going to involve, it's going to involve the perps flipping from different emotional states and treating the target, maybe nice and then hostile, but it's gonna go over the top in stage two. You're gonna get aggressive street theater. You're gonna get hostile street theater. You're gonna get intense, obvious surveillance. The people, like I said, a lot of them are not going to be able to. They're not going to make it through stage two. Okay, it involves people breaking in and doing things in stage three, to the point where if they can't get you, they're going to get your attention in stage three. Okay, but usually people don't make it past that. A lot of people are already onto it in stage one. The personal information gets their attention. The little suggestions, when you move into the doom and the threats and all that of stage two, a lot of people freak out. Okay, they become discredited. They might become incarcerated or worse. You move into the break-ins at stage three. You're dealing with people drugging you, poisoning you, assaulting you, attacking you when you're asleep, attacking your pets, sabotaging things at work, nonstop directed conversations, nonstop workplace harassment, nonstop street theater, nonstop surveillance, aggressive, obvious surveillance, aggressive noise campaigns, aggressive neighborhood campaigns, fuming, intense electronic harassment, 24/7, V2K, the things that involve the demonic, like poltergeist activity, very intense things. It's all going to be coming from everywhere, all at once. Okay. You're going to have the bell tones. You're going to have the voices. You're going to have, the tinnitus. You're going to have the electronic harassment. You're going to be dealing with people that are doing this in a lot of different places. The target's basically going to feel like they cannot escape. At that point, they might go on the run. Okay. And of course, there's nowhere they can get away. If you're a target who's experiencing higher forms of harassment, you're not going to be able to get away with this stuff. They will poison the surfaces of your house. They'll throw the powders in. They'll lace the burners. They'll attack, your light bulbs. They'll do all kinds of things to freak you out. And some of it can be toxic. Some of it can just be there to freak you out. You're going to be dealing with, community harassment, stonewall. You're going to be getting blackballed at that point. The effects of paranoia, extreme paranoia, irrational paranoia, environmental tyranny, propositional tyranny, isolation, deprivation, frustration, anxiety. The target's going to be, getting to the end of their rope, and eventually they can move into a psychosis. Okay, so you might ask me, well, what's the solution? Okay, what do I do? We have to be aware of this. It's pretty basic. You don't want to overdo this. If you're aware of what they're doing, if you're aware of the motives, if you're aware of who you were dealing with, we've talked about that in the perps, that this stuff has a spiritual foundation. It can move away into different areas involving the authorities, and you have to be careful of becoming, a victim of propositional tyranny. People believe that all the police are gang stalkers, or all the Freemasons are gang stalkers, or it's just the government. Okay, and then they start speculating about how many How many people in their family are working for the CIA? Or it doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes that happens. I think that's pretty rare. A lot of things can happen. Uh, you know, the problem is it's okay to speculate. It's okay to wonder, hey, do I have an implant? What's going on? Who's involved? How are people involved? That's natural. But when you start reading into things, when you're moving from stage 3 into that heavy environmental tyranny, into propositional tyranny, where you are, logistically impossible stuff is going to be happening to you. That's not something that anybody would deny. Okay, but you have to know how to break it down. You have to see how people are involved in this. You have to go back and you have to look at if you're going to, for example, if somebody is looking at the government aspect of this and they're into MK Ultra and all that, great. That's wonderful. But look at where the government came from. Look at the hierarchy of power. Look at the kingdoms. Do some history. Break this stuff down a little bit. What about the Freemasons? Okay, what about the people in power? How are they connected to the secret societies? How is a secret society, individuals connected to the occult? And how is that stuff connected to the spiritual aspect? And you're going to find that there is a logistical breakdown of this, okay? And just because you're dealing with people who have personal information on you or attacking you with innuendos and stuff like that involve things that nobody should know about, doesn't mean they've got cameras in your bathroom. It doesn't mean that they can read your mind. It could mean that they're literally influenced by demonic entities, okay? And a lot of that happens. And like I said, well, it's just, I don't believe, fine. You can believe whatever you want, but if you're a target who's experiencing higher forms of harassment, there are other explanations than supercomputers in a cryogenic chamber controlling the world, okay? And even if there is something like that, they got it from them. It's not by coincidence that this world has gone from people riding around on horses to flying around and jets and supersonic vehicles and all the stuff that we have as far as computers. And now we got deep fakes. And I'm talking to you guys, and who knows where you're from. You could be you could be on the other side of the world listening to me right now. Okay, that's not a coincidence. And if you get into the book of Daniel, you're going to see all that stuff. You have to break this down. You have to avoid the propositional tyranny. You have to know what you've been thrown into. You have to understand the world around you and the menagerie that you're part of. And you have to understand the motive of this whole thing. Okay, that's first. You have to be aware. And then, you have to simplify your life. They are trying to make your life more complex. If you try to solve this, if you try to control other people, you're going to be beating your head against a brick wall. It's not going to happen. It's not going to help. And do not buy into this. Well, you got to survive this game theory kind of stuff. Are you going to win? Are you going to lose? This is not a contest. And if it is, it's obviously not fair. Okay? Anybody who would consider a contest something that's completely unfair, where you're completely outnumbered, it's obviously you'd have to put a different label on that, like bullying or gang stalking, okay? And anytime you start to experience the effects of this stuff and you start to feel like you're at the end of your rope, or you make mistakes, or you start reading into things, or whatever happens, okay, you got to forgive yourself because, like I said, a lot of people don't make it through this. They don't. They simply do not make it, okay? So if you make a mistake, remember why you made the mistake. The gaslighting process is intense, involved with gang stalking, in the sense that they try to get you to internalize these things, and they obfuscate the way you became dysfunctional, because people do experience dysfunction, and when you do, you have to remember why. And if you're one of those targets that plays this game for a long time, you will get to the point where you start to forget that every now and again. And you will start to take responsibility for the stuff that had nothing to do with you. You have been subjected to this, and you have to remember it. Okay? Simplify your life. Make it simple. Don't make it more complex. Don't sit around and try and figure out what they're going to do. There's a lot of things that you're going to have to just kind of let go for a while. If you're experiencing heavy harassment, when I say simplify, I'm talking about, maybe holding off on trying to find a spouse or a significant other, getting into intense financial endeavors, starting a business or something like that. I know it sucks. Okay. And it's not that you can't have hope for those things, but you're going to have to be realistic. That's part of the simplification process. You have to be realistic. You're going to be dealing with isolation. You're going to be dealing with deprivation. You're gonna want to hook up with people. You're gonna want to team up with people. You're gonna want to get your life back, but you have to remember that that actually was more of an illusion than anything. If you're one of the targets that has just been awakened to this stuff, you didn't know it was possible, like that person that came through the live stream. It's real, okay, and it was always there. The life you were living before was a figment of your imagination. This is reality, okay. That's the scary part about this. People think you've moved out of reality into a psychosis. And the only way they're going to convince you of that is if you're experiencing the propositional tyranny. Then you're going to be gaslighted into believing that you're being driven nuts into the point where you're believing things that involve the disinformation. But really, it's real. Okay. You are being attacked. There are things tailored to make you, believe you're going crazy. But there's a way that you can move out into dysfunction. Okay. So you're walking a fine line. The point I'm making is, this is reality. Okay. And there are a lot of people out there that don't know about this. You have to remember that as well. So before you go walking around with a sign, handing out T-shirts or whatever, you're gonna have to remember that you didn't know about this either. And I'll have to admit this, and I've talked about it before. If I had seen it for myself, I would think it was crazy. Okay. Something you have to remember, and you're going to be dealing with that because you're a very small minority of people. There's not going to be a lot of targets out there unless you get online because it's just the way it works. It wouldn't work any other way. So you want to be realistic, you want to simplify your life, and you want to develop protocols. Okay. And as far as employment, as far as your health, all those things, you want to try and focus on that. Focus on the things you have control over. Okay, because they love that. When they have something you need, or they get their fingers in your business when you're trying to do something, we'll say you're trying to start a business, or get a wife or a boyfriend or a husband or whatever. They're gonna involve themselves in your life to the point where they're gonna try and hinder you and drive you crazy, and that goes into the way that targets are provoked. Okay, and you want to limit the avenues that they have to use emotional manipulation on you and get their fingers in your business. I'm gonna go back into the comments here. Okay, let's see here. All right. E. Craig says we can't lone wolf this. People survived the Great Depression because they united. Well, okay. The thing you got to remember, there are people out there that are pretending to be targets. The other thing you have to remember is there are a lot of people out there who are legitimate targets who are experiencing the effects of gang stalking, which makes it hard for people to get together. And unfortunately, it's a harsh reality. And I would say that if you don't learn to be independent, you're not going to make it. Okay. There's going to be times where it's going to be cool. We get together on chats. People can try to unite. If you can do that, my hat's off to you. But I've been doing this for over 30 years and I've seen very few people that have been able to do that. Okay. And a lot of things go wrong. They might do it for a while and then things go really bad. Okay. Am I saying it can never happen? No. I'm just saying that you have to learn to do the lone wolf thing. And if you can't, it's going to be very hard for you to survive this. You're going to have to, think about it. Uh, there's always a way for you to connect online. So in that sense, you don't have to. But I'm going to tell you this right now. When I started this whole process of gang stalking, there was no targeted individual community. There wasn't at all. Period. In fact, there was decades before I even heard of anyone else talking about this stuff. Period. Okay. Most of them were probably in mental institutions. In fact, when I went up there to detox from my tranquilizer addiction, I ran into people up there, but they were already discredited. Okay. All right. All right. Let's see here. Okay. All right, guys. Well, it looks like you're having a dialogue out there. Anybody have any burning desire involved in this topic of paranoia and sensitization? I jumped around it a little bit, and we can go into the sensitization part in a more intense way in the next video. I touched on that, and I focused more on the paranoia. Nicholas Bosman says, I think we're alive because we're already durable. Well, I know there's a lot of people out there that are. And like I said, that's one of the reasons I went into this, paranoia, because there are different stages to this, and they will get your attention however they can if they have to. And I've talked about that with targets before. It depends on how you want to play this game. If you want to try it and be king, everything, they can come in and get your attention. Okay. That's what gang stalking is. If you want to try and roll high, and you're afraid to, I don't know, let anybody know it's getting to you. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks, and they can come in and they can get your attention. Okay, there's a lot of targets that I've dealt with. Maybe they're fake, where they think they got this whole thing under control, but there's a lot of things they're not dealing with. Okay, there's a lot, and there are targets out there who are persecuted because they are, and a lot of people think they're lying. Oh, you're hearing voices. You're 24/7 V2K. That's just you're just crazy or whatever. Well, who knows what it is? It could be demonic. It could be electronic. Who knows? But because these individuals are not dealing with it, they want to dismiss that whole thing. Or other targets who are not dealing with break-ins or intense workplace harassment or persecution from their family members or whatever. There's a lot of judgmental people out there in the targeted individual community, and they want victory. They want solutions. You just survive this, okay? Because it can get intense. And the thing that people have to remember is that they will move into an area of propositional tyranny because this stuff is designed to make you super paranoid. It is designed for traumatic invasion, even to cause a person to have split personalities and to move into a place where they believe that they are literally crazy or they literally go crazy from propositional tyranny and believe things that are not true. Worry about that. Forget about your pride, forget about all that other stuff. And a lot of targets get focused on that. Okay. Okay. Nicholas Bosman says, I think sensitization as a topic would be helpful. Yeah, help people desensitize. Well, it just comes into you got to realize what they're doing. And if you realize they are trying to take you in to a place where they are invading your mind and causing associations, okay? Literally, it's an invasion into your mind. And there's nothing you can do. They don't ask permission, they attack you. That's traumatic invasion. We'll talk about that in the next video. but the motive is to move you into a propositional tyranny. And that's, really when you get into the crux of being a targeted individual and you get people, I want you to, tell me why I should believe that gang stalking is real. And, it's ridiculous. Okay. Because there's so much plausible deniability around this whole thing. There's so many things that people just don't know about. That's why I call it an awakening. Okay. And if you're not aware of the spiritual reality of the world, you're not aware of the reality of what a lot of people consider conspiracy theories when it involves the occult, when it involves the secret societies and all those things together. If you don't know about that stuff, it doesn't matter. You're not going to convince somebody who hadn't been awakened to this stuff that it's real. They don't know. It's not part of their world. It sounds crazy. And they will use that to take you into a place where not only other people believe you're crazy, but if they get you to believe disinformation, if they get you to process information wrong and start getting you to read into things, you will be crazy. I mean, it'll still be real. It's not crazy if it's real, but you're going to be reading into things to the point where it's there's at that point, no one's even doing anything to you. Okay. You're literally reading into it, or you're reacting in a way that allows them to manipulate you at the very least. You don't want that. Oh, okay. E. Craig wants to interject something in here. Everyone thinks the Simpsons are predicting all this stuff. It's an example of almost everything that is desensitizing us of anything and everything. Well, actually, that goes into something else, E. Craig, and that has to do with the Mandela effect. It has to do with a lot of things, and it's what I talk about when it comes to the spiritual aspect of gang stalking. Okay, if you want to watch a video, get on my channel and watch multidimensional gang stalking. Because what you're going to see, and it moves into the clairvoyant street theater, it moves into all these directed conversations involving personal information and stuff like that. They don't always have to have a hack in your phone or putting cameras in your house or whatever. Okay, and when you get into the biblical examples, if you're somebody who believes in the Bible, you'll know about the story of Paul and Silas in Philippi. What was going on there? They cast the demon out of a soothsayer or a prophetess that was telling the future in that area, and that's why they got thrown in jail. This is Paul. He knows the way to eternal life. And what'd she do? She harassed him for 3 days. He cast the demon out of her. Now she can't tell the future anymore. Amazing. So what they do, they threw him in jail. They threw both Paul and Silas in jail. That's the story that people tell in church about how they started singing and the jail broke open and everything. But they don't ever tell the stuff, how they got there. And she wasn't using the shotgun technique, okay? And that stuff is in the occult. It's involved in the secret societies. That's how the elite are deceived. That goes into the hidden knowledge and secret wisdom, okay? So when you get into the occult, you look at all this stuff, whether it's the Rosicrucians who take all this stuff through, that was kind of their job, Freemasons, Illuminati, Rosicrucians, Committee of 300, Council of 33, 13 families, the royals, all that stuff. It goes back into the lineages, goes all the way back into Egypt. You can see that, the pyramid, the all-seeing eye, the hidden knowledge, the secret wisdom, the Gnosticism, the illumination. And what does it involve? It involves a dimensional perspective, hidden wisdom and knowledge that comes from the spiritual dimension that will involve future events. Okay, it's as plain as day. And when you get into things that involve things like The Simpsons, predicting the future, or other things that are out there that are part of a mass gaslighting campaign, and then you have what? You have people who believe the government is going back at portholes, or creating time dimensional, wormholes or whatever, and all these other things that involve the exact thing that we're talking about: control programming to propositional tyranny. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's one of the best examples out there. Oh, The Simpsons, the people, they're predicting the future. Or some of these other individuals involved in Hollywood, which involves the infiltration and the basic mind virus that's there to gaslight everybody, and that they know things. They're people, from another time porthole or something, or they're traveling through time. You can see all these conspiracy theories out there. People trying to figure out how they know this stuff. I just told you how they know it. The same way the secret societies have this information, and it's the same thing that has deceived the elite. Okay, they're running the world. Okay, and that goes into who? The principalities and powers, and they are the ones that have it. Pretty intense. That's, desensitization. There's your desensitization right there. If you don't know how they're doing this stuff, you will give in to the propositional tyranny. You will be deceived. You will give in to the lies. And that's what I talked about before. That's how the secret society is deceived. Think about all the things that they were indoctrinated with concerning this dimensional perspective wisdom. It has taken them captive. Okay, we're talking about things that are prophesied in advance. And that's the confirmation that they have, that they believe, that they are deceived with. And to them, it's 100% valid. Why? Because they don't know how it's happening. They have no idea that they are being deceived that way. And they see these things come to pass. They see all this stuff, involving all these things. They believe the archons or the demiurge or the spirit guides involved in the occult. And for them, it's got to be true. They told me this stuff was going to happen when I was a little kid. They told me 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And look, it happened just like they said it was going to, yeah. And I've talked about that. Watch the video, Multidimensional Gangstalking, and you'll see. Right? It's right up the alley of what we're talking about. Extreme paranoia, propositional tyranny. Well, guys, I think I'm going to get off here. We've been talking for over an hour and a half. It's getting late, and like I said, I'm holding a phone here. My arm's about ready to break in half. And I appreciate you guys joining the live stream. It's been fun. It's been real. I think we had up to 30 people at one point. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Don't forget to hit the like button and share this with people. Unless I take it down, maybe I'll decide that maybe I'll decide I need to erase it. No, I'm just kidding. Sometimes I do that. If I do, don't make a big deal out of it. And I'd also like to thank people who help support me and the channel. I've been going through a time right now with my health where I haven't been able to work that much. And I certainly appreciate that. God bless all you guys. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.